Hello everybody. Today we're going to be looking at how do we get Buchla type of sounds out of a sequential Prophet-6 or a similar synth. You can take these ideas to whatever synth you have, but we'll be looking particularly at the Prophet-6 today. If you think this is a little bit silly to get Buchla sounds out of a synth like this, we're not really trying to act like we can clone the Buchla sound or the Buchla experience, but we can definitely get sounds similar to that, and more importantly, we can take inspiration from the sounds and designs and kind of the approach of Buchla instruments, and take that and let it enrich our sound design, music making, and performance experience. So that's kind of how we'll be approaching this tutorial today. Now, the Buchla sound is definitely unique. There's more to it than just features. It's not just this module and this low pass gate or, kind of like a list of features, but it's really the entire circuit makes the tone. And even it's not just tone, but a big part of it is control, expression and doing things in novel ways from a performance aspect, and kind of how does the sound change? How does it move? A lot of times synths, they're kind of like a guitar, like a traditional piano instrument. That's kind of how they're approached. You kind of like on your guitar, you kind of dial in your amp and you kind of just set it, you get a tone you like and kind of dial in your pedals or whatever, and then you just play it. A lot of times it's the same with synths. If you think of like the classic guys like Herbie Hancock or Jan Hammer or Prince, it's a lot of times it's just like, all right, I got my patch dialed up and now I'm just ripping on the keyboard, playing my solo, or just, playing my chords and singing, maybe occasionally doing some mod wheel or the cutoff knob, but overall just kind of still approach like an organ or like a piano, like a traditional instrument, which is definitely great, and a lot of great music's been made that way and will continue to be, but we're kind of looking at other ways of approaching an instrument like this today. With a Buchla, you might have, it might be a repetitive sequence going, but it'll change and morph in so many ways. You have function generators and random sources that can be used in creative ways to modulate sound, along with sort of the tactile aspect, these very unique novel control surfaces that Don Buchla developed as part of the artist's performance and interaction with the sound and the change of the sound as they're performing. Having said all that, there's definitely a Buchla type of sound, and a kind of a way of approaching performance and sound design. Just want to say, if you haven't yet, recommend watching my FM synthesis video on the Prophet-6. Link it on screen right now, or if I can't figure out how to do that, it's just down in the description, one of the two or both. But yeah, it'd be a good kind of like starting point and foundation to then go to this current video. So yeah, definitely recommend checking that out. And you can of course take these ideas to any synth, these new approaches, new ways of looking at things, but also not just thinking of like we're making like these kind of lame wannabe Buchla patches, but also thinking of, a synth like this has a lot of advantages and features not found on a Buchla. Different types of modulation, high pass filter, all sorts of stuff that are advantages on a synth like this as well. And we'll mainly be looking at the Buchla Easel kind of like as our Buchla touchstone. It's simpler than the modulars, and it's really a good distillation of the Buchla paradigm and kind of like a clear, concise form factor. And just a disclaimer, I have never played a real Buchla before, which I think is a testament to how uncommon and out of reach they can be. If you do have your hands on a real Buchla, you probably live in a handful of large cities in North America. And even then, I think, relatively speaking, they're very uncommon to come by compared to something like this, which is much more likely that you'll find in a local music store. Definitely not as common as like a Yamaha or Korg or even a Moog, but much more accessible and common than a real Buchla. But having said that, I've definitely very familiar with the sound, and I have had Eurorack modules that were based very heavily on Buchla designs and those circuits, and have listened to a lot of music with Buchlas and watched lots of videos over the years, and am very familiar with that sound and kind of that approach. So if we kind of want to make sounds inspired by the Buchla, we kind of have to understand what that sound is, kind of what goes into the recipe of the Buchla sound and approach. Of course, there's traditionally West Coast synthesis and East Coast, broadly speaking, West Coast being sort of additive, starting with simple waves and adding harmonic complexity, and East Coast is more subtractive, starting with these rich waveforms and filtering them down in envelopes and kind of subtracting harmonic complexity in that way. Which is true, but they're kind of not mutually exclusive like that. West Coast synthesis has subtractive elements, for example, filtering or using a low-pass gate that takes out harmonic content, or East Coast, can be additive as well. You can do exponential FM on a mini Moog or a Pro 1, or even the old Moog modulars. You could do FM on those, and we would still definitely say the Prophet-6 is heavily based in the East Coast way of doing things, and that sound, it's kind of like a modern version of a Prophet-5, and the Prophet-5 was very heavily inspired by the mini Moog. So if we look at what the sound generation is on a Buchla, it's monophonic, and it has two oscillators, a modulation and a complex oscillator. The modulation oscillator being more simple and can be used as a low frequency modulation source or as an audio rate modulation source. Can do linear FM frequency modulation or amplitude modulation, which is a part of how that harmonic complexity is added. And then there's a complex oscillator, which has a timbre circuit, which is a wavefolder. And wavefolding is a type of distortion, not clipping distortion, so not like, not like an electric guitar, like your Proco Rat or your Metal Zone pedal. That's clipping distortion, but this is, instead of clipping, the wave folds back into itself. And that's another way of adding harmonic complexity. And then there's a low pass gate, which can be used as kind of has VCA and filtering functionality, but it can be used as a combination. Removing high frequency content and amplitude at the same time. So like a combination filter VCA. Does not have resonance and has like more of a gentle cutoff slope. Like this is like a traditional 4-pole 24 dB per octave filter. I think the Easel might have like a 12 or 6 dB per octave, so much of a gentler slope. There's a sequential voltage source, which is exactly that. It can sequence voltage as pitch or sequential modulation. There's a attack sustain decay envelope that can be one shot or looping. A pulsar, which is sort of like a descending ramp wave LFO, but can do other things as well, envelope and clock. And there's a random voltage source and spring reverb at the end of it. So that's kind of a quick overview of just some of the basic functionality of a Buchla easel. And then of course there's an expressive control surface In the case of the easel, you have this keyboard-like touch plates that can modulate sound depending on how and where you're placing your fingers on the plates. Don Buchla wasn't really interested in like a black and white traditional keyboard, and was more interested in developing new innovative ways of control and performance and expression from the musician. So if we look at what do we have two oscillators that can have simple waves of triangle on each. And number two can act as a modulation oscillator in low frequency mode or audio rate for exponential FM. So that already sounds kind of familiar, the kind of implementation of two oscillators and one modulating the other from the easel. We have a filter, low pass filter, and also a high pass filter. And VCA with, they each have separate envelope generators and velocity modulation. And we have a low frequency oscillator with different waves, including this last one, a random source. And these can go up into audio rate as well. And then we have an arpeggiator and a sequencer. And we do have a spring reverb as well, or we can have a spring reverb as well at the end of the signal. So if we look at where Prophet-6 and a Buchla easel overlap, feature-wise, there's a lot that's not all that different, that kind of can be used in very similar ways. So if we have a quick demo of the signal flow, we can just make an initial patch here. So first we'll just put it in unison for now to be monophonic, and in the spirit of West Coast synthesis, let's start with two simple waves, these two triangles. And you know, we can see we can do some FM right here. It's of course exponential FM, not linear like on the easel, but still frequency, audio rate frequency modulation. Start to add a lot of harmonic complexity. And we don't have a wave folder, but we do have these continuous waves, these shape knobs. And of course, a wave folder has a very distinct type of sound. This definitely won't sound like a wave folder. In that very distinct way, but you know, if you kind of think of what a wave folder is doing generally, it's there to it's adding harmonic complexity. So in that sense, we can definitely think of these knobs as ways to dial in greater or different harmonic complexity in these sounds we're doing. So we can play with these and you know, create more complex sounds or even modulate them here. And we go here into this low pass filter. This, of course, like we said, it has a steeper cutoff slope, and you know, it's resonant. Even though there's no resonance on a easel, I still do like to use with these types of sounds. I often do like to use resonance just to fatten it up a little bit, and you know, in the Prophet-6, the cranking the resonance, you don't lose the low end or everything below the cutoff like you do on a lot of traditional low-pass filters like a Moog or a Curtis filter. You know, it still keeps that low end, so adding resonance can kind of fatten it up a lot of times. And then, yeah, of course we have velocity, which can be performance modulation or programmed with the arpeggiator or sequencer. And you know, if we think about how a low pass gate works, it's a combination filter VCA. You know, we can kind of emulate that type of behavior with our envelope here by setting the amp and filter envelopes with the same amounts, or very similar amounts. So that's the basic signal flow kind of at its core. And of course we have the arpeggiator up here. And, the arpeggiator has these different controls where, it doesn't have to just be set it and forget it, kind of like is typically often done. Like, you just kind of turn it on and you just change your chords and it just does that, over and over. But, these can be performance controls. That's kind of morphing the range, the number of notes, and the direction, and all these different types of things. It doesn't have to just be set it and forget it, but these can be thought of as performance controls as well, to kind of morph the sound and the how it's repeating those notes. In addition to using the hold feature as well, can be really useful with arpeggiation. And of course, the velocity, not just a performance control, but we can also program it as part of the arpeggiator and sequencer, because they record the velocity. So it's sort of like can be a sort of recorded modulation source, or we can think of it, when we're recording a sequence, how do we use velocity sequentially to kind of have our filter or amp go to different amounts as part of the design and change of that sound over time. And of course we can sequence pitch here, and we can also transpose by holding the record button and pressing different keys. We can move that sequence around, and we also have clock and these clock divisions here, and these can really be thought of as performance controls as well. It doesn't have to just be set it and forget it like it would typically be, and it kind of just starts running off sort of machine-like. But we can also think of these as in creative ways of how do we use these in performance as well, and really how do we use the whole surface of the synth as performance. It's all here for us to change and morph that sound over time. So what we're kind of getting at here is, with this comparison, is helping us think of approaching this instrument in a way outside of how these kinds of polysynths are traditionally used. If we think of the music that's made with them, and the demos and the reviews we see on YouTube or at trade shows, there's definitely a typical way they tend to be used, which is great. That's great music, but also there's a lot of other ways that aren't usually explored, and that's kind of what I'm trying to help us think about a little bit more in this tutorial. So I don't want to talk too much more. I'm just gonna close out with an improvised performance to show some of these ideas we've talked about in practice. And I think you could ask yourself, would I know if it's not a Buchla if I was just listening to it? If you are very familiar, or you have your own Buchla and you've played it for a long time, then yeah, probably you can tell you're very familiar. But for an average person, maybe not. But that's kind of not even the point. If the musician is enjoying performing, and hopefully the listener is enjoying listening, and really kind of what the point is we're using Don Buchla's contributions to music to enhance whatever music we're making and whatever instrument we're using. We can use that knowledge to move in a certain direction, and it can give us a fresh way of thinking from how we're typically working. So anyways, thanks for watching, and like and subscribe if you found this tutorial useful.